first in a feature that I believe we're calling Scotch Corner. I'm joined by two of my very favourite journalists who just happen to be Scottish to get their take on the week's news and to look ahead about how things might develop over the weekend. We have Lindsay Mcintosh from the Sunday Times and Kevin Schofield from HuffPo. First of all, Lindsay, I'm looking at you in the studio. I know exactly where you are. Kevin, you're on the line. Where are you? How windy is it where you are?
I'm at my mum and dad's up in Scotland, actually, Ruth, and it's not windy at all. We're in the unusual position in Scotland of looking aghast at the terrible weather in London and being a little bit smug about it, to be honest with you. There was a bit of snow
I
this
was about to say, did
morning.
you not get a wee flurry, though? Was there not just a wee February flurry this morning?
There was a little bit of snow this morning, and I managed to get out with the kids who are up visiting their grandparents for a quick snowball fight. And then the snow has gone. It's turned to rain now. So yeah, and I'm just looking out the window, and there's barely. I know that people in London don't want to hear this right now, but there's barely a breath of wind. It's incredible. So Storm Eunice seems to have largely passed us by here, fortunately.
Oh, that sounds like it's just Greek as usual. Well, Lindsay, I thought we would start with a big question today, which is basically why are all the institutions of the United Kingdom just collapsing this week?
Do you want that in 20
just
words?
A couple of seconds. Well, I was thinking, we've got the royal story, which is a pretty difficult week for the royals.
Yep.
You've got the Metropolitan Police that's being investigated while simultaneously investigating the royal family and the government. Do you know, it just seems like everything's a bit broken at the moment.
It's all falling apart at once, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And actually, you say the royal story. There's obviously two royal stories this week, isn't there? There's Andrew and his settlement with Virginia Giuffre, and then there's Charles and his charity being investigated over alleged cash for honours. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, looking at all these institutions, in a way, the most worrying one is the Met to a degree, because the Met is the organisation that's supposed to obviously keep law and order, and it's the one that really has had so many examples of real kind of rotting at the heart of the culture there. So, you know, you've obviously going back to Wayne Couzens, which is almost a year ago when he raped and murdered Sarah Everard in London. But even just since then, there have just been so many awful examples of the culture within the Met Police. So we had the messages from the Charing Cross police station, which seemed to hit every possible, example of hate speech, essentially, that you could possibly...
I mean, it was a proper tour de force. It wasn't
really
just racism
was.
and sexism. It was homophobia. It was misogyny. It was disability. It was everything.
All your isms and all your
it was
phobias
everything.
all at once, just laid out there. And then the other one to mention, actually, is Christina O'Connor. So this is a woman that we interviewed 2 weeks ago now. She was a Camden woman who was the victim of a burglary, reports it to the cops, and she's emailing the detective afterwards, and rather than kind of giving her support and advice and so on, basically hits on her and asks her out. You know, so it's just from the kind of low level misogyny, sexism, etc., right through the gamut, as it were. And as I say, these are the people that are supposed to be holding all the other institutions to account. So what hope is there?
Well, Kevin, I've kind of always thought that the Met's a funny old structure. Like, I don't know how you can also police every borough in London, like a local police force, but also be in charge of national responses to organised crime and terrorism and all the rest of it. And I'm just looking at who replaces Cressida Dick and how you can get Sadiq Khan and Priti Patel to agree on who replaces Cressida Dick and what their priorities should be, and how you can fix the Met.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, right now, he's the ultimate poison chalice, really. Clearly, Sadiq Khan had lost all confidence in Cressida Dick, and her time ran out. But that, just removing the person at the head of the organisation, doesn't obviously solve problems at a stroke. Whoever comes in next, we've just gone through them. They've got an in-tray like you wouldn't believe. I wouldn't imagine there'll be too many people battering down Priti Patel and Sadiq Khan's respective doors, demanding to take on the role, because it's almost an impossible job. Cressida Dick was obviously very popular with the rank and file officers, but clearly if you don't have the political confidence behind you, then it's an impossible job.
So you can have somebody who is very good sort of on the shop floor, as it were, and they prove themselves, and then they rise to the top of the ranks. And actually, the job that they end up doing is a very different job to what they were good at to start with. And as I say, I think the kind of the metas and magnification of this, because as you say, Ruth, you've got to police every borough that you have there. You've also got kind of core responsibilities nationally. You've also got to be a manager of, however many cops that they have on the beat. And is it actually possible to find somebody that can do that single job?
Well, and also to make sure that everybody under them understands that they're all pulling in the same direction when they've got so many different calls on politics of it. And the other thing, I was looking at some of the polling, like people already don't trust them before this happened. So a couple of weeks ago, there was like 60% of people that didn't think that they were the right people to look at the Downing Street parties.
Yeah.
So the kind of uphill struggle is just massive.
Yeah, and I wonder if that polling just kind of talks to our lack of faith in institutions generally at the moment. So the fact that it is very much tied up with the Partygate issue, for want of a better word, at Downing Street, people are presumably...
Let's call it a work event.
Let's call it wine and cheese, shall we? So, the fact that you've got people sort of looking at the way that our politicians are kind of running the country at the moment, thinking, I don't trust these people necessarily. That kind of spills over into other core institutions. And then, just public faith just diminishes generally.
Well, just to stay on a theme, I'm going to move from police, politics, royalty to the church. Natural progression there.
Okay.
Justin Welby hates Bake Off. Now, for those of you who haven't read the story, it's on the front of today's Times. He has said that the Great British Bake Off is wonderful TV, but he's only said that to cover himself because he compared it to gladiatorial games, said his wife and his daughter love it, but this voting people off thing, it's awful, it's terrible, and it's the modern equivalent of gladiatorial games. And I'm just wondering if there could be a more secular heresy, Kevin, than saying you hate the Bake Off.
Well, yeah, I don't know how he's managed to get himself embroiled in this particular controversy. And anyone who even has a passing interest in the Bake Off will know that it is the least gladiatorial TV reality quiz or show, whatever you want to call it, possible. I mean, the contestants all love one another. They all cry whenever anyone gets voted off. So to try and compare that to gladiatorial game. I mean, I'm no great historian, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't what happened in the Roman amphitheatre way back when Christians were fed to the lions. It's just a lovely, quintessentially British, cuddly programme. Everyone loves it. Survived all the controversy about leaving the BBC and going to Channel 4. It's thrived. I think
Mary Berry and still survived.
Absolutely extraordinary, really. I think if the Archbishop is trying to win people back to the Christian flock, I think he probably could have gone about it a better way than slagging off the Great British Bake Off.
You're just sitting there laughing. You're not even taking it serious. Can I just say, as somebody who's been in the tent, because I did the stand up to cancer one a few years ago, I cannot say that he's more wrong. Like, it is lovely. Everyone was genuinely nice to each other. Nobody, it was so nice. Prudence occasionally emails me just to see how I'm doing. Lovely. Just lovely people doing lovely things. So unlike politics.
It was an excellent name drop there. I'm quite jealous.
I know. I'll just pick that up off the floor.
The thing that I love about the Welby story, the two things that I love about it. One is it's a break from the abject misery, which is everywhere. If the roofs aren't flying off buildings, every institution is falling apart. So I love that about it. But I also love the fact that he was so thin-skinned that at the reaction that he got from his first kind of intervention.
He didn't even have the courage of his convictions, Lindsay. He didn't even see it through. He didn't even go, and do you know what? It's not just the Bake Off I hate, but see that pottery throwdown? It's sinful. Sinful, I tell you.
Yeah, stand by it.
Oh, great. Well, from something that's a bit lighthearted, let's go to something incredibly serious, and talk about what's happening in Ukraine and on the border there. But from a kind of political edge of it, because we've seen, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary, making all of these interventions going to Ukraine or Poland or to NATO, etc. There seems to be a bit of jockeying almost for position from the political side of this, of who can get the kind of, not the best press, but at least sort of get themselves on the telly.
Yeah, I think there is to a degree. What I would say though, and the bar was incredibly low, and obviously the whole point of this story is what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and we clearly shouldn't lose sight of that. But just from a domestic point of view, if you looked at the kind of position that the government was in prior to that, whether that was Partygate, whether that was the fallout from Brexit, whether that was some of the more kind of ludicrous interventions by certain ministers, what they've actually managed to do, I think, for the most part, in this kind of developing foreign policy story, is to sort of make some reasonably sensible interventions, not try and kind of seize the limelight too badly. Limelight's a terrible word in this context, but you know what I mean, and really have managed not to make themselves look worse than they did to start with, which, as I say, I realise is a low bar, but I think we have to give them some credit for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, Kevin, if we look, let's look at Ben Wallace first of all, because in terms of Britain being one of the first countries to get some anti-tank weapons in there, to actually give some proper help to the Ukrainian army and armed forces, his kind of brusque, no nonsense, almost anti-Liz Truss, not wearing a furry hat on, outside the Kremlin with his personal photographer. I mean, he really has been quite businesslike about all of this, hasn't he?
He's been hugely impressive. I mean, obviously, I've known Ben for quite a long time, from back when he was an MSP. So, I mean, that wasn't yesterday. And you would never have known then, really, how far he would end up going, and is now being mentioned in dispatches as a possible future Prime Minister. He's obviously got an army background. He's a very safe pair of hands. He knows what he's talking about. He's got very good judgment. I think he's very politically astute as well. And, yeah, I get what Lindsay's saying. You don't want to over personalise this, but I think he's had a good crisis thus far. And you're right, he does it in a very understated way. He's not trying to grab the limelight. He answers the questions that he's asked. He deals with the challenges in front of him, and he doesn't appear to be overburdened with ambition, which maybe others in the cabinet have.
Yeah. Kevin Schofield, Lindsay Mcintosh, thank you so much for joining us.